All right, happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining Automation Hour. It's our 45th episode, and thanks for joining us on a holiday weekend coming up for U.S. Folks and during the summer. All right. For those of you joining us for the first time, all lines are muted, so please use the chat function to post questions about today's presentation or a general process automation question. And if we're not able to get to your question during today's session, we will continue the discussion on our Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour. After the session, we will post the link to the deck as well as the recording on our YouTube channel and post it on our website, automationhour.com, as well as the Trailblazer community and Twitter. And for our upcoming session, this doesn't look updated. We have for our next session, Jason Teller and Anna Bose, and they're the Salesforce automation product managers, and they will be presenting the highlights from the recent Summer 18 release. So definitely join us for that, as well as the other sessions for the rest of the year. So I'll give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io. Without that, we cannot bring you this free webinar series. And here are your co-hosts, David, Rakesh, and I from last year's Dreamforce. And we're hoping to see everyone out at this year's Dreamforce. And with that, we're excited to have a community member on here to talk through Flow. Tamar is joining us for the first time. So with that, let me hand it over to her. All right, you should have control now.
Yes, can everybody hear and see?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So, hi, thank you for having me. My name is Tamar Erlich. I'm a Senior Salesforce Administrator at Atlassian. And I'm going to be talking today about a Flow demo that I created for myself just to learn things about Flow. So it's a completely made up scenario. I'm going to give you some background on what I did and what I defined my process requirements. Then I'm going to show a demo of how it works. And then I'm going to go over some challenges that I found while designing the flow and how I solved them. At the end, I'm going to summarize two key solutions that I repeated over and over while designing this flow. And then there's some time for Q&A. So background information is I have opportunities that record classes being sold. Opportunity product is the classes that are being sold, and opportunity contact roles keep track of students that will take those classes. I also have a custom object class that tracks the sessions of upcoming classes, and a student registration, which is a junction between contact and class. My requirements for the process that I designed is when an opportunity is won, I want to display a screen with the list of classes that were sold in this opportunity and that have a future start date that have not happened yet and have open spots to register students to, and then be able to select a single class. Then move on to the next screen that will display a list of students that were mentioned on this opportunity as contact roles, and be able to select one or more students' contacts from the opportunity. And at the end, my flow will automatically register those contacts to the selected class while avoiding creating duplicate registrations. And this was my requirement. Now I'm going to show you a short demo of how this works. So I have an opportunity here, and you can see that the opportunity has 2 classes as products and 3 contact roles that will be taking those classes. Now, if I change the opportunity stage to closed one and save, I now have this new screen, new flow pop up because the opportunity is 1, telling me that I'm ready to register students for classes, and click next to continue. So when I click next, I will be presented with all classes, future sessions for the classes sold in this opportunity. And you can see that there are 2 upcoming sessions for the yoga class and 1 upcoming session for the Connect with Your Team class. And here below, there is a list of all the students that are presented in this opportunity that can be registered for those classes. So I'm going to select one of the classes, and I'm going to select 2 students here, and then I'm going to click next, and it's going to tell me that there were no duplicate registrations, 2 new registrations were created, and it's going to give me a link to see the class, and I can see that 2 new students were registered for this class. I can also see it here on the opportunity, 2 new students registered for this class. And I can do it again. Select another class, for example, how to connect with your team. Select the 3rd student here, and it'll register this student to the class, and so on and so on. And now we'll go back to the presentation, and I'm going to talk about a few challenges that I found when designing this flow and how I solved them. So the first challenge was I wanted to show more than the class name when picking a class. I wanted to show the date, the session start date. I wanted to show the spots available, and so I needed information from a few fields to show here. So how did I do this? I created a formula on the class object, concatenating information from all the fields that I wanted to display. And then when setting up the pick list label here that shows the class, I assigned this formula to the label, so I could see all the information in one row. Challenge number 2 was similar. As you know, the opportunity contact role is a limited object in Salesforce, and you can't do much with it. But so you get only the contact ID in this junction object. But I wanted to display my student name, contact name, not their ID. But I could not create a formula on the opportunity contact role object because it is limited. So the solution was to create a formula on the contact object for the full name, and then in the flow create a cross-object formula referencing my opportunity contact role through the contact to the full name formula that I created on the contact object. Next challenge was that I wanted to show only classes that were sold in this particular opportunity and not query all the classes that I have in the system. So when selecting criteria for the S-object collection for class, I can limit by the fields. Let's say if I have a field for open spots or a field for session start date, I can select these directly, but I can't select the products from my opportunity. So the solution was to go over, when preparing the flow, go over all my opportunity products and create a text string that has all the IDs, all the product IDs for the opportunity products, and then use this text string to filter out, loop through my class collection, and filter out only, check if this text string contains my current class ID, class variable. And if it does, then I can filter out a subs as object collection for only the classes that have the product sold in this opportunity. My next challenge was I wanted to display the S-object collection that I just filtered, the class for those opportunity products, and the student list on the screen in a dynamic choice variable. But dynamic choice resource can only display records and not S-object collections. So how do I conquer this problem? I had to create a custom object called dynamic record choice that will temporarily have records for my S-object collection, display them on screen, and then delete them once my flow is done. And the way to do it is to assign and create those records while looping through my S-object collections for, let's say, for the class and students. And the second part is then populating the dynamic choice resource with the records that I'd created for class and for student. Now, since for class, I only needed to select a single class, I could store the selection in the variable. In the dynamic choice record, there's an option to store a variable. But for the students, since I wanted to select multiple students, I had to resort to a different way of storing all the selections. And this is the challenge number 5 here. How do I store? Because dynamic record only allows you to store the latest item selected. But I wanted to store all the selections, all the students. And the solution is to take the screen choice field and store it in a text variable. And this will give me a list of all the selected IDs from the screen. And this is what I used here to capture. This is how I captured the selected students. My next challenge was that I wanted to avoid duplicate registrations, meaning that if I go over a second iteration of the flow, or next time I run the flow, if I select the same class and the same student, I don't want to create another registration record for the same student in the same class. So for this, I used a similar technique like filtering the products for the classes. I just did 2 decisions. First, I found out if the student is selected on screen, and from those selected students, I filtered them. If they were already registered to this class, I filtered them out, and then I created registration records only for new students that were not already registered for the class. Then I had my final screen that displays the total of existing registrations if I found them, and the total of the new registration if I created them, and a link to the class record so I can go and check that everything is okay. Then, of course, every good design and best practice for flow is to include error handling. So I handled my errors several ways. When I was pre-populating data in my flow, I collected all the opportunity information and displayed errors if the opportunity had no products or contact roles, because you can't continue without this data in those objects. Or if I couldn't find any classes that match my criteria, I also can't continue, so I displayed an error screen. And then I had a third error screen for any other unexpected error, telling the user that an unexpected error has occurred, and also sending the current user that's running the flow an email with the fault error message that they can, give to the administrator to check what's going on. This is the design of my completed flow. For ease of navigation, I highlighted here sections of what the flow is doing. So I'm starting here. This is my initial screen, the get started screen. And I'm populating, I'm looking up the opportunity, I'm looking up the opportunity products, the opportunity contact roles. And if I can't find any of those, then I'm going to my error handling and showing a screen saying that I couldn't find any and going back to the beginning. Then I'm starting to collect my classes to display the classes that have open spots and for the product. So first I'm creating my text variable for the opportunity products, the product IDs, and then I'm going to loop through my class collection and see if this class is for this product. And if it is, I'm going to assign it to a collection, a sub-collection filtered, and create the dynamic record choice that I will display later on the screen. Same thing for student. I'm looping through the opportunity contact roles, and I'm assigning dynamic record choice and creating the dynamic record choices for students. This is my screen, my selection screen that will show the class pick list and the students that I can pick from. And I'm assigning the screen choice with all the selected students to a text variable. Then I'm performing a check to see if the students are selected are already registered for this class. If they're not, I will create the registration records in this part here, assign the registration records, and then at the end, create them, delete the temporary dynamic record choice, and present the end screen to the user. Two key solutions that I used over and over during this design of the flow. The first one is filtering an S-object collection using a list of IDs from another S-object collection. And this is done by first creating a text variable of all the IDs that you want to compare against, and then creating the second S-object collection matching all my criteria except the collection of record IDs, and then looping through this collection and having the text variable, having a decision that checks if the text variable contains my current loop variable. And this took me a long time to realize, because it's kind of the other way around. Instead of comparing your loop variable to something, you're comparing the text string to your loop variable. And you have to use contains because this has multiple IDs and this is a single ID. And if you find if the answer is yes, then you add it to a sub-collection of your filtered results. A key solution number 2 was how to take an S-object collection and display it in the screen choice field in a dynamic record choice. And the solution to that was to create a custom object and loop through my S-object collection and create a record for each choice that I want to display on screen. Now, in order to be able to filter those choices back and show them on screen, for each record that I created, I included the flow name, the session ID, because 2 people might be running the same flow at the same time, and I don't want to display other people's choices on the screen. So I have to limit to this session ID, the pick list name that I'm displaying, that I'm currently displaying. The choice label will be displayed on screen, and the choice value, typically the ID, will be stored for the flow to use. And then you populate your dynamic record choice and filtering for session ID, for pick list name, and for flow name. At the end of the flow, you clean up those temporary records because they're not needed. These are the resources that I used where I learned all those neat tricks. One of them is actually an automation hour video that taught me how to do the cross-object formula for the opportunity contact role. And this is it. This was my demo, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
All right, so far there aren't any questions, so we'll just give folks a couple of minutes to start typing away. So while we're waiting, how did you go about learning Flow? What resources did you use to get started?
Well, I'm an avid listener of Automation Hour, so I've been listening and watching a lot of those. And the community is my next go-to place for all questions and searches for everything that I want to find. And there are several very, very good success community groups for flow and automation that I follow. And I learn a lot from them. And I follow your blog, Jen, and actually also Rakesh and David's blogs and a lot of other blogs on automation that have taught me a lot.
Great. No one has any questions out there.
Did you have any trouble trying to figure out the record delete and keeping the system records? What can you talk a little bit more about, like how you came to that and why you chose the object model, and was there anything that you had to do for that object to store those temporary records?
So I just created, I can maybe show here. So if I click, the reason I created this first screen is because I did not want to create the dynamic record choice records before I actually start the flow, because the minute I display the screen, the records will be created. So only when the opportunity is closed won, I display this first screen, and only when a person wants to really start registering, then I click to go to the next screen. And if I will go here now, this object is usually hidden, but I created a tab for it just for demo purposes. You can see that my flow created 6 records, 3 for the classes and 3 for the students. And it has the flow name, it has the pick list. So 3 for the class pick list, 3 for the student pick list. And this was what will be displayed on screen. This comes from the formula that I created on the class that has all the information. This comes from the cross-object formula that I created in the flow. And this is what will be stored, the value of the class ID or student contact ID. And this is the session ID, just in case 2 people are running at the same time. I will then filter my display results for the screen based on the session ID. And then when the flow is done, my flow here, let's say I'll do this and finish the flow. If I'll go back here and refresh, I have deleted my temporary records. It is not mandatory that you delete those records, but it's just better, because otherwise you'll just be keeping a lot of records that are not needed for future.
Cool. Okay, we have questions from the audience. Bruce asks, when looping an S-object collection to compare to a list of IDs, can you review what's the scope of the collection you're comparing? Meaning, all of that record or only ones matching some other criteria?
So let me maybe show here. So, for example, I want to filter only classes that have products that are in my opportunity. So I have looked up here all my opportunity line items, all my opportunity products. And then I will loop those opportunity products, and I will create a text variable. No, this is not here, this is the assignment. I will loop through them, and I will create a text variable that concatenates the IDs, the product IDs, and separates them with a semicolon. Now, I will separately look up my classes, and whatever I can filter out, like start date greater than now, so future start date, spots available greater than 0, these are fields on my class object that I can easily check for, but I can't check the product in a list of products. So this I did not filter here. So I have a class collection that has all the products, all the classes for all the products with a future start date and spots available. So then I will loop through my classes and have a decision. I will take my text product IDs that I collected from my opportunity, and I will check if this text, which has all the IDs from my opportunity, contains the current class product ID, because I'm looping through the collection that I prepared that only lacks the filter for the products. And if the answer is yes, I would assign it to my DRC, the dynamic record choice object that I will be displaying. If the answer is no, I will just continue to the next class loop variable. And at the end, I will create the class records. Does that answer the question?
Yes. Thanks, Bruce. So Dominique's question is, when using the temporary object model, does the running user require read or read-write permissions on that temp object?
That's a good question. Since this is a play ground, I'm a sysadmin, so I, of course, have read-write on all objects. I believe that flows run in system mode. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Jen, David.
They run in system when it's a process built or triggered flow.
Okay, so if they run in user mode when triggers from a screen, from a Lightning component, then I believe the user will need read-write access to this object. Otherwise, you won't be able to create those records.
Rita, thanks for a great presentation. Can you please show what happens with a duplicate registration?
So I query all the existing registrations for the selected class, and then I go through and I decide. First, I check if I found any existing registration. If I found any existing registrations, I have a loop that loops through them and checks loops through the registrations. If a student is selected, and it checks if it is in this registration list, registration students. If the current selected student is already registered, I will ignore him. And if he's not already registered, I will assign him to the student registration collection, which I'll then use to create the registrations when I exit this decision loop.
Okay. Marlene asks, can you please show how the flow is included on the page layout?
Okay. So if I go here, this is a flow component, Lightning component that I just point to my current flow, and I pass the current opportunity ID to it. So my flow will have the starting record. And I set the component visibility to only show when the opportunity stage is equal to closed one. And that's why when I changed the stage to closed one, I saw this component, and before that, it was not visible.
Cool. All right, does anybody else have any other questions related to this presentation or a general process automation question? We'll just give a minute or so for folks to type away. You're getting a lot of comments on the great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, let's give a couple more seconds. I know it's a Friday afternoon in the summer. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come through. So thank you so much for coming on and presenting. This was really cool in terms of sharing your challenges and how you went and solution things. So I'm pretty sure a lot of folks will go back and watch the presentation, look through your deck to get those cool tips. So thanks so much, and thanks everybody for joining Automation Hour. We will see you on July 20th when we have the Salesforce product managers on to present. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye.